Hello everyone, it's me Uncle John. Today I am going to read S3 6008 The Secret Garden, Chapter 3 The Robin Who Showed the Way. At first, each day that passed was exactly like the others for Mary Lennox. Every morning she awoke and found Martha kneeling upon the hearth and building her fire. And after breakfast, Mary gazed out the window at the huge moor, which seemed to spread out on all sides and climb up to the sky. She realized that if she did not go out, she would have to stay in the big, gloomy house and do nothing. And so she went out. She did not know that this was the best thing she could have done. For when she walked or ran along the path, she was stirring her slow blood and making herself stronger. She stayed out of doors nearly all day, and when she sat down to her supper at night, she felt hungry and drowsy and comfortable. Mary's meals were served regularly, and Martha waited on her, but no one bothered about her in the least. Mrs. Medlock came and looked at her every day or two, but no one inquired what she did or told her what to do. Mary supposed that perhaps this was the English way of treating children. She was even learning to dress herself, because Martha looked as though she thought Mary was a silly and stupid when she wanted to have things handed to her and put on. Rather than resent Martha's familiar ways, Mary had begun to enjoy hearing about the Moreland cottage, which held 14 people who lived in 4 rooms and never had quite enough to eat. She was most attracted by the stories about Dickon and his animals. "I like Dickon," she said to Martha one morning at breakfast. "But I know he wouldn't like me. No one does." "How does thou like thyself?" Martha inquired. Mary hesitated a moment. "Not at all, really," she answered, "but I never thought of that before." Martha left to visit her family that day, and Mary felt lonelier than ever. She went out into the garden as quickly as possible, and the first thing she did was to run around and around the fountain flower garden 10 times. When she had finished, she felt in better spirits. "Springtime is coming," she said aloud, sniffing the air in the orchard as she walked toward the path outside the long, ivy-covered wall. Martha Hale had told her that morning that although it was a long way off, springtime was on its way. Suddenly she heard a chirp and a twitter, and when she looked at the bare flower bed at her left side, there was the robin she had seen during her first day in the garden. She was hopping about and pretending to pack things out of the earth. He hopped, fluttered his tail, and twittered. It was as if he were talking. His red waistcoat was like satin, and he puffed his tiny breast out, and was so fine and so grand and so pretty that it was as if he was showing her how important and like a human person a robin could be. Best of all, he allowed her to draw closer and closer to him. Mary chirped and talked and coaxed, but she did not put out her hand toward him or startle him in the tiniest way. To think that he should actually let her come as near to him as that. She was so happy that she scarcely dared to breathe. The robin hopped about under the shrubs and over to a small pile of freshly turned up earth. He stopped to look for a worm. The earth had been turned up when a dog tried to dig up a wall, and in doing so scratched quite a deep hole. Mary looked at it, not really knowing why the hole was there, and as she looked, she saw something almost buried in the newly turned soil. It was something like a ring of rusty iron, and when the robin flew up into a tree nearby, she put out her hand and picked up the ring. It was more than a ring, however. was an old key, which looked as if it had been buried for a long time. Mary Lennox stood up and looked with an almost frightened face at the key that hung from her finger. Perhaps it has been buried for 10 years, she said in a whisper. Perhaps it is the key to the garden. She looked at the key for quite a long time before putting it in her pocket and pacing up and down the walk. No one but Mary ever seemed to come here, so she could walk slowly and look at the wall, or rather at the ivy growing on it. The ivy was a baffling thing. However carefully she looked, she could see nothing but thickly growing dark green leaves. It seemed so silly, she said to herself as she looked over the wall at the treetops inside, to be so near the secret garden and not be able to get in. She kept the key in her pocket when she went back to the house, and she made up her mind that she would always carry it with her when she went out, so that if she ever should find the hidden door, she would be ready. The next morning, Martha returned from her home across the moor with a gift from her mother for Mary, a skipping rope. Mary, who had never seen a skipping rope before, was delighted, and once she understood what it was for, couldn't wait to run outside and try it. She skipped around all the gardens and around the orchard, resting every few minutes. After skipping along her own special walk for a while, she stopped with a little laugh of pleasure, for there, lo and behold, was the robin, swaying on a long branch of ivy. He had followed her, and now he greeted her with a chirp. "You showed me where the key was yesterday," she said. "You ought to show me the door today, but I don't believe you know where it is." The robin flew from his swinging spray of ivy onto the top of the wall, and he opened his beak and sang a loud, lovely trill. And then something wonderful happened, something that seemed to Mary to be magic. A sudden gust of wind swung aside from those loose ivy trails, and Mary jumped toward them and caught them in her hand. She had seen something underneath the ivy, a round knob that had been covered by the leaves hanging over it. It was a knob of a door. She put her hands under the leaves and began to pull and push them aside, her heart thumping and her hands shaking a little in her delight and excitement. The robin kept singing and twittering away as if he were as excited as she was. She put her hand in her pocket, drew out the key, and found that it fitted the keyhole. She turned the key, and then she took a deep breath and looked behind her up the long walk to see if anyone was coming. No one was. She held back the swinging curtain of ivy and pushed the door, which opened slowly. Then she slipped through it, shut it behind her, and stood with her back against it, looking about her and breathing quite fast with excitement and wonder and delight. She was standing inside a secret garden. The end.